the girl who tamed the Warbat. Screaming started before anyone saw the monster. Meera sat in the broken loft of the burned mill, knees to her chest, tracing circles in the ash. Below, Bright Hollow woke for market day. Carts rattled, doors slammed, traders shouted prices. All those sounds felt far away, like they belonged to a world she could watch but never join. She hugged her only treasure, a tiny wooden toy horse, and listened the way a child who cannot speak learns to survive, by noticing everything. The first shriek tore through the sky. It was not human. Not animal. The sound punched through wood and stone, shaking dust from the rafters. Meera flinched, hands clamped over her ears. Somewhere below, a baby wailed. A crate crashed. The second shriek shattered every window on Market Street. Glass exploded into glittering rain. The church bell cracked with a broken last note. Torches guttered and went out as if sucked dry. Darkness fell too fast, swallowing the evening light. A wall of black cloud rolled over the moon. Heavy and wrong, people began to run. Meer crawled to the edge of the loft and peered through the broken boards. Villagers stumbled and collided in the sudden gloom. Mothers clutched children. A cart overturned, potatoes rolling like scattered marbles. Then she saw the eyes. Two pale green lights hovered above the square, higher than any rooftop. They blinked once, slow and cold. A huge shadow swept over the houses and the wind changed, carrying the metallic smell of tombs. Nightbane, a voice whispered. The Vampire King's Warbat. The creature dropped out of the clouds with one mighty beat of its wings. Nightbane was bigger than any building in Bright Hollow. Its body was all black fur and stretched leather, ribs like prison bars under tense muscle. Fangs as long as swords jutted from its jaws. When it landed, the cobblestones cracked under its talons. A horse reared and bolted. Soldiers ran into the square with crossbows and spears, the captain shouting for formation. Village mages lifted their hands, fingers bright with magic. Old Father Corin held up a silver symbol and shouted prayers. Arrows flew first. Not one reached the beast. Each bolt turned to ash mitre, burned away by a shimmer of invisible power around Nightbane's body. Fire and lightning followed. The Warbat only opened its mouth and screamed again. The sound hit the spells like a hammer, breaking them into sparks. One mage collapsed. Another clutched his ears. Kill it! Before it calls the vampires! Someone cried. Meera should have been frozen with terror. Instead, something else moved inside her, a strange pull, like a thread tying her to that shadow in the sky. She felt it in her chest first, then in her own shadow on the floor. The dark shape stretched, leaning toward the window, toward those distant green eyes. Walk. It was not a word in her ears, but a command in her bones. Meera tucked the toy horse into the pocket of her torn dress and climbed down the ladder. Her bare feet hit the cold ground. People shoved past her, shouting at her to move, but she did not stop. She walked toward the square, toward the place everyone else was running from. "Stupid child! Get back!" a woman yelled, grabbing her arm. Meera twisted away and kept going. The closer she came, the quieter everything felt. Not because the noise was gone, but because it was far away, like the echo of another world. Nightbane loomed ahead, ripping at the grain storehouse. Sacks of wheat burst, golden chaff swirling around him like pale snow. The Warbat turned. Those terrible green eyes found her one tiny, ragged girl standing alone in the open. Its head dipped lower. It sniffed the air once. Behind her, the captain shouted about saving the child. Crossbows creaked. Meera did not run. Her shadow slid forward on the stones, moving faster than her feet. It reached the edge of Nightbane's massive shadow and touched it. The world stopped. Nightbane froze, jaws open, fangs dripping. Its wings hung half unfurled. Smoke seemed to pause in the air. For one impossible heartbeat, everything held its breath. Then the Warbat bowed slowly, as if submitting to a king. The most feared creature in the Vampire King's army bent its neck until its snout nearly brushed the stones before Meera's bare feet. Its wings folded in tight. The monstrous chest rumbled, not with a roar but with a low, Rolling purr, Meera raised a shaking hand and laid her palm against the cold, rough skin of its nose. Images crashed into her mind. Endless nights over burning fields. Chains woven from living shadow. A distant master who saw only a weapon. Centuries of hunger and loneliness. And under all of it, a constant searching for someone who felt like her. A single tear slid down her cheek. Behind her, the silence broke. She's cursed. The demon has taken the girl. She's one of them. Villagers shouted, voices full of fear instead of thanks. Rough hands seized her shoulders, yanking her away. Nightbane reared with a furious snarl, but Meera flinched and shook her head, a tiny instinctive motion. The warbat stopped, muscles trembling, eyes locked on her as villagers dragged her back. They shoved her into the damp stone cell beneath the guardhouse. The door slammed. Iron bolts slid into place. Outside, voices argued about burning her, blessing her, sending for priests. No one mentioned kindness. High above the village. Nightbane circled and circled, refusing to leave, his shriek shaking the clouds. None of them looked higher still, into the deepest part of the night, where shadows were already moving, dark figures, with crimson eyes answering their warbat's call. The vampires were coming for the girl who had done the impossible. Asterisk. The citadel of shadows, the night tore open above Bright Hollow. 3 shapes descended from the clouds, their wings silent as falling ash. Their eyes glowed like burning coals, scanning the village with predatory precision. When their boots struck the cobblestones, even the torches dimmed. Screams died in throats. Breath froze in chests. They were vampires. The leader, a tall woman with silver hair braided with bone rings, stepped forward, her face sharp and cold as moonlit steel. "Where is the child who commands the warbat?" she demanded. No one answered. Captain Rix tried. He managed one word, "We," before the vampire slammed him against the wall with a single elegant hand. His legs kicked uselessly in the air. "Lies waste my time," she hissed. Nightbane shrieked from above, circling restlessly. The sound shook rooftops. The vampire smirked. "There's our confirmation." Within minutes, guards pulled Meera from the cell. She stumbled in the dirt, still gripping her toy horse. Villagers shouted curses and prayers. Some yelled to kill her before the vampires did. Others begged the vampires to take her far away. The silver-haired vampire knelt beside Meera, studying her like a puzzle piece. "You made the king's familiar kneel," she murmured. "A mute human child. How curious." Rough hands lifted Meera. She kicked weakly, silent tears falling, but the vampire only tightened her grip. "Bring the child," she ordered. "Nightbane will follow." And he did. The warbat dove from the sky with a thundering flap, landing behind them so hard the earth cracked. Soldiers screamed and fled. But Meera only looked back once, her eyes meeting Nightbane's. The creature lowered its head, as if promising to stay close. Then wings opened. The vampires launched into the night sky. Meera held against the silver-haired woman's chest. Wind whipped her hair. The world below shrank to scattered lights and dark forests. She felt the air thin and sharpen as they rose above the clouds. Nightbane stayed beside her, massive wings cutting through the mist. Each beat of his wings sent currents spiraling around her, keeping her warm despite the icy height. "Your familiar is loyal," murmured the vampire holding her. "Too loyal." Meera said nothing. She could not, but her heart pounded with questions. Why did the creature obey her? Why did she feel the same strange pull inside her chest, as if Nightbane's shadow was tied to hers? Dawn threatened the horizon, a thin silver line. "The vampires flew faster. There," the silver-haired vampire said, pointing. Meera gasped, suspended above the mountains like a fortress woven from darkness. The Obsidian Citadel rose into the clouds. Chains of living shadow anchored it to faraway peaks. Towers spiraled upward, shaped like frozen flames. Bridges twisted in impossible curves. Torches of blue fire lined every balcony. It was terrifying. And beautiful. They landed in a courtyard lit only by ghostly flame. Dozens of armored vampires knelt as one figure stepped forward. The vampire king, Alistair, was tall, taller than humans should be, his robes flowing like liquid night. Shadows curled around his feet, whispering and coiling. His hair was black as ink, his face carved from stone. His eyes glowed with quiet, ancient power. The silver-haired vampire lowered to one knee and pressed Meera forward. "My king," she said. "The child." Alistair's gaze swept over Meera, unreadable. She felt the weight of centuries in that look. Nightbane landed behind her, wings folding protectively. The king's eyes flickered surprise. Then something sharper. Nightbane growled at him. Every vampire in the courtyard stiffened. Two guards reached for weapons. "No," the silver-haired woman snapped. "He will not attack the king." But Nightbane stepped forward. Placing his massive shadow between Meera and Alistair, the courtyard went deathly silent. Alistair lifted a hand. Not in threat, but in calculation. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Nightbane, stand down." "The Warbat didn't move," gasps echoed. "That is impossible," someone whispered. "He obeys only the king." Alistair approached Meera, slow and deliberate. Nightbane snarled, wings lifting halfway. "It seems," the king murmured, "you have accomplished something even I could not." His gaze sharpened. "How long have you held this bond, child?" Meera raised both hands, one finger. "Hours," the king repeated, astonished. "It took me 50 years. He stepped closer. Shadows twined around his ankles, reaching for hers. Meera felt a strange pressure heavy, ancient, testing the connection between her and Nightbane. Then Alistair unleashed a tendril of shadow that wrapped around hers like a chain. Pain shot through her chest. Meera gasped without sound and dropped to her knees. Her shadow writhed across the stones. Nightbane roared and lunged. Vampires shouted. Blades were drawn before the Warbat could strike. Everything exploded. A wave of darkness burst from Meera's body. A pulse of raw shadow that froze the courtyard. Every vampire stopped mid-motion. Nightbane froze mid-leap. Even Alistair staggered back. Hand at his chest for a moment. The citadel held its breath. Then Meera collapsed. Nightbane caught her gently in his claws. Alistair stared at her with something he hadn't shown in centuries. "Call on fear. In recognition. That shadow technique," he whispered. "Only one bloodline ever wielded it." The nobles murmured, confused. Alistair's voice dropped into a near whisper. "She carries my brother's shadow." "The Prince of Shadows." Silence. Shock rippled through the court. The king's next words changed Meera's life forever. "This child may be my brother's daughter." The shadows of the court. Meera woke to warmth. Soft blankets, steady candlelight, and the rhythmic sound of Nightbane's breathing filled the chamber. She blinked slowly, unsure where she was. The ceiling above was carved with silver constellations, glowing faintly in the dimness. This was no cell. No village. No fear-filled attic. She was inside the Obsidian Citadel. Nightbane lay curled beside the bed, his wings folded tightly so he could fit inside the enormous room. His enormous eyes watched her with silent devotion. When she moved, he let out a quiet rumble, like a giant cat purring. A door opened. A woman in dark robes stepped inside. She was older than most vampires Meera had seen, with streaks of silver running through her hair. Her eyes glowed amber instead of red. "Calm, warm, not hungry, not cruel. I am Magister Lys," she said gently. "The king's advisor." She approached slowly, making sure not to startle her. "You have been unconscious for 6 hours. That shadow burst drained your strength." Meera touched her chest where the pain had been, then looked toward the knitstand. Her toy horse sat there, cleaned and carefully placed beside a plate of fruit and bread. Someone had handled it with care. "His Majesty wishes to see you," Lys said. "He has questions, and you deserve answers." Meera hesitated. Lys lowered her voice. "He won't hurt you," she said. "But the court is unsettled. Your bond with Nightbane has shaken every noble in this citadel." She gestured to a black dress folded neatly on a chair. "Dress quickly." "Nightbane will stay here?" The Warbat growled. Lys sighed. "He may wait at the door then. But he cannot enter the throne room." Nightbane huffed in disapproval, but obeyed only barely. Meera followed. Lys through winding corridors where shadows bent like living things. Vampires paused to stare as she passed. Some whispered. Others recoiled as if she were a dangerous spell. Finally, they reached two enormous doors carved with scenes of battles, shadows, and a crowned figure. Guards opened them with a slow groan. The throne room stretched endlessly. Columns shaped like twisted obsidian bones reached to the ceiling. Blue fire floated in the air. Vampires lined the walls in rows. And at the far end sat the king. Alistair. He rose when she entered. His movements were controlled, precise, as if weighed by centuries of memory. "Come forward," he said. Meera stepped onto the cold black stone, her reflection rippling beneath her feet. When she reached the base of the steps, she bent her knees in a clumsy bow, the only one she knew. Alistair studied her in silence. His red eyes glowed with unreadable thought. "Tell me your name," she spelled it with her hands, Meera. "And your family?" She shook her head. "No family. No memories. Where were you born?" She made the gesture for unknown. Alistair exhaled slowly. "Are you truly 10 years old?" She raised all 10 fingers. The king's jaw tightened. "That is the same age my brother's child would be today." A murmur rippled through the court. A noble stepped forward, Lord Dresek, his face sharp with disapproval. His hair was white as ice, his eyes burning with old arrogance. "This is absurd, your majesty," he snapped. "She is a human child. Nothing more. A mistake of fate." Alistair did not look at him. "She froze 30 vampires with one pulse of shadow." "An accident," Dresek shouted. "A fluke." "She commanded Nightbane," Alistair said quietly. "My familiar. The strongest beast in the kingdom. That thing obeyed a human girl." Lady Moressa stepped forward, disgust curling her lip. "It is unnatural, dangerous. She should be destroyed before she becomes more." "Destroy." The word struck Meera like a slap. Lys moved between her and the nobles. "You speak of killing a child?" "A half-blood abomination," Moressa hissed. "Shadow mixed with mortal blood if she truly carries the prince's signature." "Enough!" Alistair's voice was soft, but the shadows in the room trembled. Then he turned to Lys. "Your findings?" Lys unrolled a parchment, her hands steady. "I examined her shadow signature while she slept. There is no doubt. She carries the umbral lineage unique to Prince Caspian and his father before him." Gasps spread through the room. "Impossible," Moressa whispered. "She is royal blood," Lys continued. "And her shadow is stronger than Caspian's at the same age." Alistair lowered his eyes to Meera. "Do you understand what this means?" She did not fully, but she nodded anyway. He stepped down from the throne and knelt beside her. For the first time, there was no coldness in his face, only grief. "My brother was murdered 10 years ago," he said softly, "along with his wife and child. Burned in a fire." Meera's heart beat. Quickened, burned, like the mill she'd woken. In fear, smoke, screams she couldn't remember, but somehow felt. Alistair's voice hardened. "And someone in this citadel claimed their bodies were found." His gaze snapped to the nobles. "Who confirmed the evidence?" Silence. Dresek swallowed. "I do not recall." "That is a lie," Alistair said, stepping forward. "You were captain of Caspian's guard?" "You were responsible." Dresek's jaw clenched. "Are you accusing me?" Alistair's eyes darkened. "I am stating a fact. Someone betrayed my brother. Someone hid his child. Someone wanted the Shadow Heir dead." Meera felt the weight of the court's fear pressing on her skin. She looked around, faces twisted in hate, shock, guilt, questions. She was no longer just a mute orphan. She was a threat. A possibility. A secret that should have burned in the fire. Alistair turned back to her, voice low. "If you are Caspian's daughter, someone in this kingdom tried to kill you once." His eyes softened, "and they may try again." Meera's small hands trembled, but she lifted her chin. She understood danger. She had lived in danger her whole life. Alistair's voice rose, echoing off the throne room walls. "Until the truth is revealed, this child is under my protection. Any harm to her is treason." The nobles stiffened, furious, but none dared speak. Liss, Alistair commanded, take her back to her chambers. And someone bring Nightbane before he destroys the eastern wing. As Meera left the throne room, she glanced back one last time. The king stood alone in the fading blue firelight, holding something small in his hand. Her wooden toy horse. He looked at it with an expression no one else could read: pain, memory, and a grief so old it shook the shadows around him. Midnight assassins and the awakening of Shadow Night settled heavily over the Obsidian Citadel. The floating fortress drifted in its silent orbit above the mountains, its chains of shadow creaking softly in the cold wind. Torches of blue flame flickered along the balconies, casting dim reflections across polished black stone. Meera sat on her bed, knees pressed together, clinging to her wooden toy horse. The room was dim, lit only by a single floating candle. Nightbane lay curled beside the door, a massive lump of fur and folded wings. His breathing was calm, steady, but one eye stayed open, watchful. The throne room confrontation still pulsed through her mind. The nobles' cold stares, their whispers, the word abomination. The way Alistair's voice had shaken when he spoke of his lost brother, she did not fully understand what she was. But she understood one thing: someone feared her existence, someone wanted her gone. Nightbane suddenly raised his head. His eyes narrowed. A low growl bubbled in his throat. Meera froze. Her shadow stretched along the floor, pulling toward the window even, though not a bit of light moved. Something outside was wrong, heavy, breathing, waiting. The candle flickered violently, then went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Nightbane snapped his wings open with a thunderous crack, just as the glass window shattered inward. 3 figures slipped in through the broken framelit fast, their bodies wrapped in enchanted black cloth that swallowed light. Assassins. Not soldiers. Not nobles. Killers trained in shadow. The first one moved toward the bed, twin daggers dripping with silver poison. The second grabbed a chain made of bone. The third lifted a curved blade etched with runes. Nightbane lunged with a roar that shook the entire room. The assassins moved like smoke. One twisted aside, slicing the Warbat's wing. Another leaped onto his back, stabbing downward. Nightbane screeched in fury, throwing the assassin into the wall hard enough to crack the stone. Meera backed away until her shoulders hit the wall. Her heart hammered. Her legs shook. No voice came. She had none, but a silent plea burned in her chest. Help. Please help. The assassin closest to her turned his masked head. Sensing the weakness, he sprinted forward. Meera raised her hands, though she had no weapon. A small, wordless cry escaped her lips. Not a sound, but a breath filled with desperation. Her shadow moved, not like a human shadow, like something alive. It peeled itself off the floor, stretching upward like rising smoke. It wrapped around the assassin's legs and yanked. He crashed to the stone hard enough to drop his blade. Nightbane struck next, snapping his jaws around the assassin's arm. Bone crunched. The masked figure screamed for the first time. The other 2 assassins reevaluated instantly. They weren't here to fight Nightbane. They weren't here to test the king's guards. They were here for her. One hissed an order. The other pulled a small object from his cloak, an orb of pale light, a silent sphere. When it broke, no sound, no magic, no shadow would function. Everything would be frozen in dead quiet. Meera's heart pounded. If the orb activated, Nightbane would be helpless. She would be helpless. The assassin threw it. Meera reached out instinctively, her palm trembling. Her shadow exploded. Darkness blasted outward, swallowing the sphere before it could activate. Shadows wrapped around the orb, squeezing until it cracked and dissolved into powder. The entire room went still. Even the assassins hesitated. Nightbane stepped in front of Meera again, wings half spread, blood dripping from a fresh wound. The assassins looked at each other. They made their mistake. They turned to flee. The doors burst open at that exact moment. Blown inward by a surge of cold magic, King Alistair entered in a storm of swirling shadows. He took one look at the assassins. His eyes glowed crimson, brighter than any torch. Traitors. The shadows at his feet lashed out like living chains. They shot across the room, wrapping around the fleeing assassins. No matter how they twisted or cut, the shadows tightened, dragging them back across the floor. One screamed. Another tried to vanish into mist, but Alistair's magic pinned him down like an insect. The last tried to throw a smoke bomb, but the king froze the air around it until it clattered to the floor harmlessly. In the end, the assassins lay helpless. Bound in ropes of shadow, Alistair approached Meera. For a moment the king didn't speak. His eyes swept over her trembling form, the broken glass, Nightbane's injuries, the blood on the stone. Then his voice dropped into a cold, controlled fury. "Lys!" Magister Lys rushed into the room seconds later. "Who sent assassins into my castle?" Alistair demanded. Lys knelt beside the unconscious attackers, inspecting their tattoos and blades. Her face turned the color of old bone. "These are no common killers," she whispered. "These belong to the Order of Crimson Purity." The room fell cold. Meera stared, confused. Lys continued quietly. "An extremist noble faction. Their goal is the cleansing of all half-bloods and hybrids. They believe only pure vampires should rule." Alistair's jaw clenched. "So they believe Meera is the Shadow Heir," he said softly, dangerously. "And they fear her blood." His gaze flicked to her. Not with suspicion. Not with disappointment. With realization. "They fear what you might become," he murmured. Meera felt something shift inside her chest, something old. Deep, like a locked door finally turning. Alistair knelt beside her, lowering himself to her eye level. "Did they hurt you?" She shook her head. Nightbane nuzzled her shoulder protectively. Alistair reached out and touched her cheek gently, surprising everyone in the room, including himself. "You showed power tonight," he said. "Power even Caspian never had at your age." Meera's breath hitched. She didn't understand. Not fully, but she recognized the sadness and pride mixed in his voice. There was silence for a moment. Then Alistair stood. "Lys," he said coldly, "find out who ordered this. I want every name. Every ally. Every traitor." The shadows behind him rose taller, like dark wings. "And if any noble touched this child's fate before," his voice dropped lower, "deadly, they will answer for it." Lys bowed deeply. "Yes, your majesty." Nightbane curled around Meera, trembling from exhaustion. Alistair placed a hand on the Warbat's head, steady and surprisingly gentle. "You protected her well," he whispered. "Just as my brother would have wanted." Meera blinked. "Brother. Wanted. She wasn't sure what the words meant yet, but they warmed something inside her. For the first time since she could remember. She didn't feel alone. Not with Nightbane beside her. Not with Lys fighting for her. Not with Alistair standing between her and the darkness, outside the shattered window. Dawn began to rise thin and pale. Meera watched the sky shift, unaware that the world had already changed, because tonight proved one thing: someone powerful wanted her dead. But someone even more powerful wanted her alive. The blood of Shadow's morning light never entered the Obsidian Citadel. The fortress floated so high in the eternal night that dawn touched only the distant mountains below. Yet inside the royal chamber, a different kind of brightness glowed, cold, pale, magical. Meera sat at the center of an ancient ritual circle, carved deeply into the black stone floor. Runes spiraled around her, pulsing with faint silver light. Magister Lys walked slowly around the perimeter, placing obsidian shards and bowls of dark water at each marked point. Nightbane lay beside Meera, refusing to move even when Lys warned him the ritual might overwhelm him. He only growled softly and curled his massive wing around her small frame. Alistair stood at the edge of the circle, arms folded behind his back. His expression was carved from stone, but his eyes betrayed his unease. "This ritual is forbidden for children," Lys warned quietly. "Her body is too young, her shadow too raw. It could break her. It could also reveal the truth," Alistair replied. "And we need truth now more than ever." Lys nodded reluctantly. Meera watched them both, clutching her toy horse in her lap. She didn't understand everything, but she sensed this moment mattered to Alistair, to the Citadel, to herself. Her fingers trembled around the little wooden figure. Lys knelt before her. "Meera," she said softly, "this ritual will show us the truth inside your blood, magical truth. Shadow truth. If you truly carry the prince's lineage, the shadow will answer." Meera nodded. Lys placed a cold stone bowl before her. It held water, but the surface was darker than ink. As if reflecting nightmares instead of light, Alistair stepped forward, pulling a dagger from his sleeve. Its blade was thin, carved from black crystal. Shadows coiled around it. Meera swallowed, but Alistair did not cut her. He cut himself. A small drop of his blood slid down his palm, falling into the bowl with a soft hiss. Darkness rippled outward across the water. "This is the blood of the ruling house," Alistair said. "If the shadow accepts her, it will call to her own blood." Lys inhaled deeply. "Child," she whispered, "place your hands in the bowl." Meera hesitated only a moment, then pressed her fingertips into the icy surface. The first sensation was cold, then heat done. Nothing. Then everything. A surge of darkness shot up her arms, rushing through her veins like a tide breaking against stone. Her shadow on the floor lengthened, stretching across the ritual circle. The black shape twisted, flickered, and then it split. Half remained her own, the other half changed. Lys gasped. Alistair stepped forward sharply. The second shadow was taller, broader, the silhouette of a man with flowing hair and regal posture. The shadow lifted its head as if awakening from eternal sleep. "Prince Caspian." Alistair's breath caught. Lys whispered, trembling, "It's him." Caspian's exact shadow signature. Alive inside her. But the ritual was not finished. The water began to boil. The runes around Meera lit up like molten silver. Her small body shook as waves of shadow magic flooded her core. Lys tried to step in, but the circle repelled her. "Alistair!" she cried. "It's too strong. Her heart can't handle this." The king did not hesitate. He stepped into the circle-shattering centuries of ritual law and grabbed Meera's hands. Darkness surged up his arms instantly, burning black veins along his skin. He winced but didn't let go. "Stay with me," he whispered to her. Meera's eyes rolled back. Her shadow pulsed violently, slamming against the floor like a creature trapped under glass. Alistair tightened his grip. "You are not dying today," he growled. "Not when I've just found you." The bowl shattered. The water rose into the air, swirling with black light. Runes exploded into sparks. Nightbane screeched, folding himself tightly around Meera, shielding her with his wings. Then silence. The darkness collapsed into Meera's chest with one final pulse. She gasped, "Tear." Returning in a brutal rush, her shadow snapped. Back to its normal shape, the ritual circle went dark and Meera slumped forward into Alistair's arms. Shaking uncontrollably, Lys knelt beside them, hands trembling. "It's done," she whispered. "Her bloodline is confirmed. She is Caspian's daughter, the true Shadow Heir." Alistair closed his eyes. For the first time since Meera met him, the king looked human, vulnerable, as if the weight he carried for 10 years finally cracked. "She is my brother's child," he said quietly, "and I failed to protect them." Lys placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "You can protect her now." But the moment of revelation did not last. A crash echoed through the citadel, shouts, the ring of steel. The hiss of magic. Alistair stood instantly, placing Meera gently on the floor. Nightbane curled around her, shielding her again. "What was that?" Lys demanded. A vampire guard burst through the door, panting and bleeding. "Your Majesty, traitors are gathering in the West Wing. Lord Dresek has rallied an army. He coughed blood, "they mean to overthrow you. And kill the girl before the truth spreads." Alistair's eyes turned pure crimson. "Dresek," he whispered. "I should have executed him the moment he opened his mouth." Lys rose. "He will strike now while Meera is weak?" Alistair looked down at the trembling child, her fingers clutching his robe. "No noble, no assassin. No conspiracy would take her again." He turned to Lys. "Prepare the castle defenses." Lys nodded and vanished in a flicker of shadows. Alistair lifted Meera into his arms. She pressed her face into his chest, breath shaky but steady. Don't fear, he murmured. This time they will not get past me. Nightbane spread his wings. Cracking the stone floor. The Warbat's roar shook the entire citadel, a king, a child, and a monster bound together by a bloodline of shadows. War was coming, and Meera, once a nameless orphan, was now the spark that would set the kingdom on fire. The battle for the Shadow Heir. The Obsidian Citadel had never known chaos until tonight. The west wing burned with crimson flames as traitor vampires stormed through the floating fortress, their armor glowing with forbidden sigils. Arrows made of bone whistled through the air. War drums thundered. The iron scent of blood drifted through the corridors. Meera clung to King Alistair's cloak as he moved swiftly through the hall, Nightbane prowling beside them like a living storm. The Warbat's wings scraped the walls, leaving gouges in the black stone. His eyes burned with rage. Guards loyal to the king raced past, shouting warnings. They've broken the shadow barrier. Dressek's soldiers are inside the throne ward. They're hunting the girl. Protect the heir. Every voice hammered fear deeper into Meera's chest. They wanted her dead. Because she was half human. Because she carried shadow power. Because she wasn't supposed to exist. Alistair stopped in a tall antechamber where blue flames flickered nervously on the walls. He turned to Meera and cupped her cheek with a steady hand. Stay with Nightbane, he commanded softly. No matter what happens. Meera shook her head wildly. She didn't want him to leave. She didn't want to be alone again, not in a world this dangerous. Alistair knelt, bringing his face level with hers. You are Caspian's daughter, he whispered. And my blood? I will not let them take you. She squeezed his wrist, pleading. His expression softened. Very well. You stay by me, he said. Not behind. Her eyes widened. Behind meant hidden, useless, afraid, but beside meant something else. Something and someone worth fighting for before she could take another breath. The tall doors at the end of the chamber burst open. A flood of armored vampires charged in, led by Lord Dressek, his white hair whipped behind him like a ghost's mane. His mouth twisted into a cruel smile when he saw Meera. Your Majesty, he mocked, bowing dramatically. Still protecting the creature? Alistair stepped in front of Meera. You will not touch her. Touch her? Dressek laughed. I intend to end her. A half-human heir to the Shadow Throne? Unacceptable. The bloodline must remain pure. You murdered my brother for the same reason, Alistair said coldly. Dressek's eyes gleamed. Yes, Caspian fell easily. But the child... the child slipped away. A small inconvenience. Meera froze. He had tried to kill her before. When she was a baby, she felt her shadow quiver in response. That fire, Alistair whispered. You said it. I did, Dressek said. A clean flame to erase a filthy lineage. Alistair's rage filled the room like a storm. Shadows surged behind him, rising like black wings. Dressek raised a hand. Kill the girl? His soldiers charged. Nightbane roared, a sound that cracked the ceiling. He slammed into the nearest group of traitors, wings stretching to full span. His claws tore through armor like parchment. His fangs flashed. Loyal guards joined the fight. The chamber erupted into chaos, swords clashing, magic exploding. Shadows whipping like hurricanes. Alistair drew his obsidian blade. It hummed with ancient power. He launched himself at Dressek. The two collided with a shockwave of shadow and bloodlight. Their blades sparked in midair. Dressek fought with ferocity fueled by fanatic hate, striking with rapid, deadly precision. Meera backed against a pillar, clutching her toy horse, watching in terror. Nightbane fought like a beast possessed, injured but relentless. Then she saw him, a hooded vampire, slipping behind the battle, creeping toward her with a poisoned dagger. No one else noticed. He lunged. Meera raised her hands, not to shield herself, but to push back the terror swelling inside her. Her shadow leapt from the floor, like a living creature. It grabbed the assassin's wrist mid-strike. The dagger clattered to the stone. Her shadow wrapped around his throat, slamming him into a pillar so hard the stone cracked. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Even Dressek faltered. What? He breathed. What is she? Alistair's voice thundered. She is the heir you failed to kill. The king struck, his blade slicing across Dressek's arm. Shadows burned the traitor's skin like fire. Dressek staggered back, snarling, You will ruin our pure kingdom for a child. Alistair stepped aside, revealing Meera. She is our kingdom, he said. Dressek screeched in fury and lunged toward her, blade raised. Nightbane was too far. Guards were too busy. Alistair couldn't reach her in time. Meera stood alone, but not for long. Her shadow burst outward in a massive wave. Not a pulse. Not a reflex. A command. Dark chains erupted from the floor, slamming into Dressek's legs and arms, binding him mid-air. Shadows wrapped around his chest, crushing his breath. He dropped his sword, he struggled. But the chains pulsed tighter, absorbing his strength. Every vampire in the chamber stopped. Every eye turned to Meera. She stood trembling, tears streaking her cheeks, but her shadow burned like a black sun beneath her. Dressek choked, staring at her with horror. You are not a mistake, he managed. You are a monster. Meera stepped forward, shadow trailing behind her like a dark cloak. She touched Dressek's forehead with one small finger. Her shadow closed around him like a fist when it pulled back. Dressek collapsed unconscious, defeated. Powerless. Alistair stood still, chest rising and falling with disbelief and relief. Slowly, he walked to Meera and held out a hand. She took it. Nightbane lowered his head, touching hers gently, his massive wings folding around them protectively. Then one by one, the loyal vampires in the chamber knelt. They bowed their heads not to the king. To her, the Shadow Heir. Lys whispered from the doorway, breathless. The Princess of Shadows. Alistair placed a hand on Meera's shoulder, his voice steady and full of something she had never known. Pride. Your father would have been proud. Little one, he murmured. And from this day forward, you will never be alone again. Meera pressed her face against Nightbane, tears falling silently, for the first time. The darkness did not feel heavy. It felt like home.